Today on Island Focus, you will enjoy meeting Acting Chief Chris Sloman of the Hawaii Emergency Medical Services. Appreciate you being with us today, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Please help us understand emergency medical services, the ambulances. How do we rely on you? I know that you're always there.
We're the folks that call to come help people, everything from somebody choking to having a car accident to somebody having, something unfortunate like a heart attack. We're the people that come and, do our best to preserve everyone's life and get them to, the closest place that can take care of them.
Please help us understand at the moment, with regards to COVID-19 that we're moving through, how has that impacted EMS?
COVID-19 has affected every aspect of how we've had to go about doing our jobs. Everything from the way we take calls in, from the way we answer 911 calls, and the way we have to screen those 911 calls for different criteria. What started off with very specific travel criteria has gradually had to move into other criteria, clinical symptoms, to help us identify and prepare our crews to deal with the virus and to protect themselves and to protect so that we don't become a vector, increasing the risk for other healthcare facilities and other patients down the line. An actual act of responding, it takes us longer. We've had to use a lot more personal protective equipment. We've had disruptions in our supply chain related to personal protective equipment. We haven't run out of anything, but we've had to make some tough choices where we've had to put people in less desirable equipment in order to protect them, that make their conditions just harder to work in. For example, right now we're having to transition our folks into like a Tyvek style suit. And so with the heat and the humidity and working in a plastic suit on top of wearing a plastic mask while you're doing heavy stuff, it takes a toll physically and mentally on everybody. Call volume wise, we saw our call volume actually drop through the peak of the pandemic, or at least the initial one. Since that time, since about late March, early April, when we sort of peaked as far as COVID cases went, we've gradually seen our call volume tick back up to normal. And we're about 10% below normal now, which is really interesting considering we have such a low visitor population compared to normal. But we are seeing, the recreational incidences tick back up, the hiking injuries and more car accidents and those sorts of things.
And so actually what I hear you saying is your life has continued, your professional life has continued as it is. Those of us in the community that have been consumed by fear and uncertainty, it is the nature of your profession to be in the unknown. And yet what I'm hearing you say is that we don't need to panic.
No, we don't need to panic. As we've learned more, we've adapted, and I think that's if you had to summarize what COVID-19 has been to EMS that's been our opportunity to have to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and we'll have to continue doing that for the foreseeable future because it presents a lot of different challenges, both in the short term with how we manage operations, and then in the long term with how we deal with budgets and economies and those sorts of things going down the road.
Your staff and your personnel are just amazing for those of us who've had personal experience with EMS. How are you working with them to keep their morale high, to reduce the stress that is imposed on them?
It's difficult. The constant state of readiness that they have to maintain, the extra vigilance in as far as the use of personal protective equipment, really the at times intense fear. I don't believe we're at that level of fear that we used to be related to COVID, but there was a point in time where no one really had a good idea of what this was. And we saw a lot of courage, I think, from our personnel because they showed up anyway, right? Not knowing what to expect. The public has been a big, huge help with their support and listening to our pleas, especially early on, to only use 911 and to call the ambulance for emergencies. And that helped us a lot to keep us from being overwhelmed and help us manage the situation to get to where we are.
And so when you say that the public has helped by calling 911 only for emergencies, has there been situations where that hasn't happened?
Yes, unfortunately. I mean, we have people, and I don't mean to make light of anybody, but we have people who call for what they think are emergencies. And I'll give you an example. Right now, we have a lot of people who are very nervous about COVID, and they might have a fever. And so, they'll call. We've had people call just because they want us to come and verify that the temperature that they're getting off of their thermometer is the same as what we get. And they don't have necessarily the intent of going to the hospital. because they're not that sick, but they didn't have another resource to go out and use. And what they don't realize is that taking an ambulance out of service for something like coming and doing a temperature check means that there's the possibility we weren't available for a real emergency that was close, like an accident or somebody, having a cardiac arrest or something along those lines.
As we move into rebalancing our lives again and recuperating from this COVID experience, how is that affecting your organization?
As we move through the process of recovering from being in a very intense and rapidly changing situation to something that's, more stable, really what's changed is our understanding of it. The actual circumstances that, we've had to deal with haven't changed very much. We're going to be dealing with COVID in how we respond to things for the foreseeable future until we get to the point where, most people are immune, either hopefully through, a vaccine at some point. I think by all accounts, those estimates are months, if not potentially a few years down the road before we get to that point. So for us to go through the process of recovering, we've got to put in place the temporary changes that we had to change, like the protocols for when we mandate certain PPE to be used, how and when we decontaminate certain types of equipment. Say, for example, certain cleaners on certain of our medical equipment have caused some like rust and things that we've had to, the unintended consequence of using those different disinfectants when we weren't able to find, what we could because of supply chain issues. And so we've come up with, and we've had to adapt and come up with different temporary solutions. And now we're having to make all those solutions permanent so that they can be in place until we get to that point where, we have mass herd immunity to COVID.
Well, then I appreciate you framing for us that we will get through this dramatic period and we will adjust. We don't know what it is at the moment, but we will do this and we'll do it together.
Thank you.
We just had the opportunity to meet Acting Chief of the Emergency Medical Services in Hawaii, Chris Sloman. Mahalo.